What's up, everybody? This is the Georgia Show. I'm Jay Grove back with you guys. Had a week off, basically from the show at least. Wasn't all that relaxing, I'll tell you that. But it was a good time out in Zion National Park for Thanksgiving. But we're back, man, and I'm excited. We got a lot to talk about. We got Georgia's regular season finale against Georgia Tech. We're gonna put a bow on that. We're going to talk about, obviously the SEC championship game and these miracle Alabama Crimson Tiders over there. Something we were talking about before the show. 2-man pass rush, 31 yards, fourth down, something else, man. Just wildness. Press box went crazy at Bobby Dodd Stadium when that went down. And got some, keys to that game, some dog stocks, and we're going to get to all of that. But let's go ahead and get to one of our amazing partners at GameTime.co. Folks, Game Time is, I've said it probably 1,000 times. I feel like it's something that I could probably, talk about at this point to myself while I'm riding down the road. It is one of the most intuitive, easy to use apps out there. You can see it right there. Plenty of tickets out there for the SEC championship game. If you want to go watch Georgia, Alabama 7.0, it feels like. I don't know how many times they've played, but it has been a lot. If you want to go see Georgia, maybe get that first win at Mercedes-Benz against Alabama, go to GameTime.co. That is the place you need to be. Use
Georgia
the promo code.
What's that now? Georgia's a visiting team, right?
I have no idea. Yeah, I'm not the first clue in the world. I can never figure that out. I mean, that's the whole part of it is I don't know which year the East is West, whatever. But listen, y'all, Game Time, super easy to use. Promo code DAWGS, DAWGS. You can save $20 off your first order. Terms apply. Make sure you check out GameTime.co. Download that app. Do what you got to do, but this is the place you need to do it through. All right, let's get into first things first here, and that's putting a bow on this Georgia Tech game. Rusty, you actually had a chance to talk about it with Roos after the game, but so as to me not looking like an idiot and just talking the whole time to start the show. Any new thoughts today after maybe rewatching or thinking about it?
I just think that it was the perfect case scenario of Buster Faulkner every day knowing what Georgia's going to do. And he had a great game plan. And, you never face an opponent that knows exactly how you're going to line up. It knows exactly how you're going to match patterns. He also knows you got 2 true freshman linebackers that are playing. And I went back and watched it today, and they struggled a little bit, to be honest with you. Jake, as you dig into that tape a little bit, you'll understand. But I just think it was a perfect storm for Georgia Tech. And listen, Georgia was clearly in control of that game. I mean, they could have scored when they needed to, but I just think that there's some things that kind of went their way. They had 2 turnovers, had a couple of very questionable calls, and next thing you know, you got a ball game on your hands. And everybody I talked to, Jake, I'm interested in you. I had a couple of friends that were there, and unsolicited, 2 different people that don't know each other, both texted me today and said, hey, man, that environment last night for Georgia Tech was different now. I hadn't seen that down. I had great music. I heard a lot of energy there, even though it was Georgia, probably majority Georgia fans. But I think they kind of walked in. Next thing you know, man, you kind of got a fight on your hands.
At the risk of sounding like a very, very old man, Palmer Toms will tell you, I put my earbuds in at one point during the game through the noise cancellation on there. I mean, it was loud. The environment was crazy. There's still more Georgia fans in there, but it seemed like, the Georgia Tech student section was kind of overpowering everything. I don't think the environment got to any one team or the other, but I mean, listen, man, when you get a 3 and out to start the game and you think, okay, we've broken the streak, we're good to go, we're going to get off the field here, and then you just go fumble on the first play. I mean, you're asking for a fight. You're just you're saying, all right, let's fight this out. I could beat you up, but I'm going to kind of tie one hand behind my back and let's get after it then. And then you make a lot of other mistakes. I just feel like Georgia played like crap, and that was after having to be up in such a major way for 4 straight games. They just didn't play well at all. Roos, anything stand out to you after kind of maybe catching some highlights or going through some stuff today? I know you do the snap count and stuff for us.
Yeah, snap count wise, I just thought it was interesting. This was the lowest participation we've seen all year, and that's not totally surprising given that they had some guys sidelined. But I mean, very few guys got in and played in this game, so that was pretty interesting to me. I thought it was very interesting to see Dylan Bell leading the way on the snap count at wide receiver, the number one snap getter out there. That was pretty interesting. So, it was a lot different, man. It was just a different game than what I think everybody expected, of course. But then a lot of the games that we've seen all year from Georgia from a numbers standpoint, they clearly had to lean on their guys, and they were clearly kind of in a fight throughout this thing, man. And they had to stick with the guys that worked. And, I thought that was pretty cool to see that they were able to get some of those guys some good run. And Rusty pointed out last night, Raylan Wilson played easily his most significant numbers of the night last night, gearing him up for that Alabama contest. I think that was a pretty smart and pretty predictable move to some degree as well. But overall, like I said, just really interested to see those numbers be so thin. I think there were 17 guys that got in on offense, which was, I believe, about 4 or 5 less than there has been in any other game this whole season.
Yeah, that's wild. And another thing, the one thing I think that disappointed me, like otherwise, I mean, I still think Georgia, once they kind of got the lead, I still think Georgia kind of controlled the game. I never really felt like Georgia Tech was going to be in any sort of huge threat. Tech didn't have the ball there at the end with a chance to tie it up. They had an onside kick with maybe a chance to get it and tie it up. But I think the one thing that was probably the most disappointing is we saw Georgia go up 31-13, and for once the game wasn't over. And that's something that Georgia usually does a pretty good job of, offensively and defensively. Now, we can point to the legal man downfield and wiping out Dylan Bell's touchdown or kind of the weirdness of that holding penalty on Dylan Fairchild and all that stuff. But ultimately, usually the offense will, kind of put it away. It'll have an answer for whatever the other team does. And, Carson Beck making a questionable decision there to throw that ball into coverage. I felt like you got to make sure your team gets to get a chance to go up by 3 scores. But Georgia didn't, Rusty, up by 18. They didn't take control of the game or keep control of the game when they had control of the game. That's the one thing that kind of probably was most uncharacteristic of Georgia last night.
Yeah, they suffocate you. We talk about that all the time. Once Georgia gets a lead on you, they'll suffocate you around the clock out. But I listen. We can talk all day. It was one of those games, and you got to give some credit to Georgia Tech. You just do. And I don't know people having a hard time with it. Georgia got some really bad calls. They got some really bad calls, but Georgia Tech took it to Georgia a little bit. But you move on. You watch that tape and you move on. And I said this today on our site. I have learned. And I got a lot of Larry Munson in me. So, Georgia could be playing, North Dakota Welding State. And I would say, look, they got a fast wide receiver and give you issues. You know what I mean? That's just me. But I've had to learn, man, this team under Kirby Smart, they're going to be up for this game. Now, they may not win it, but you're going to see a totally different, in my opinion, defensive performance this week. They will be ready to play. They will fix those issues. It's a little bit different package coming from Milroe. It's not a zone read deal with him. He's more of a scramble. He's almost got some Mike Vick to him. You know what I mean? He'll get out of the pocket. Next thing you know, he's gone because this dude can freaking fly. But he's not as much as the Auburn scheme and the same as Georgia Tech scheme. They'll run some with him, but not as much that. He's drop back passer. Everybody runs off, and next thing you know, he'll get 25 on you and just walk out of bounds. So they got to be disciplined. They got to stay in the pocket. But I have a feeling that Georgia, again, I think it's going to be a really good game, but I don't think it's going to be one of those where they're going to look lackluster on defense again.
And my takeaway too from this one, we mentioned the idea of Georgia Tech. Listen, all credit to Georgia Tech, man. They really schemed this one up well for Georgia and had a lot better talent than they've had in previous years. Haynes King made a huge difference in this game. There's no question about that. But I also think too, and we talked about this a little bit on the board today. Everybody, name me one person that wasn't looking past this game. I'm talking about in the media sphere and in the Georgia fan base. It's not impossible for me to think that that spilled over into the team. Now, I know that nobody wants to hear that, and you want to think about supreme focus all the time, but you've got Alabama on the horizon, and Georgia Tech has been what Georgia Tech's been in the course of the time most of these guys have been in Athens. And so I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but to me, it certainly felt a lot like what we saw maybe from even an Auburn over New Mexico State, where, you know, they come out against Alabama, they look like a completely different squad than they did against the Aggies. To me, did some of that creep in? That's possible. But if that is the case too, it kind of points to the idea of how focused and locked in they should be for this upcoming game.
Yeah, I mean, Auburn, Alabama as well. I mean, I know you never look past the Iron Bowl, but you know, sometimes it's the end of a long, you know, season, and you know, I don't want to get into the whole, like, you know, they didn't take Georgia Tech seriously and things like that, but I know this, and you catch Kirby Smart in a moment of candor, in a moment of just complete honesty. He's going to tell you, hey, you know, we have this kind of play to the standard, supreme focus, like you're talking about. Every game's the same. Never look at the scoreboard. We shoot for the moon on that. It's because the closer we get to it, the better we are, not because we're just going to be there all the time. And it's going to be varying levels. And I think Georgia was dealing with the varying levels. We've seen it all throughout this year. And listen, I watched them get up for those 4 games in a row, beat 3 ranked teams, beat 2 teams in the top 12. One of them to death. So, I mean, I feel like I've kind of got a feel for how this team can handle it if it plays well. And listen, guys, if it doesn't play well, last year's team, if it didn't play well, would have gotten its ass whipped in the SEC championship game too. The team before that, the team before that did. They didn't play well and got their back porch painted green. Okay, I'm painted red. Sorry, not green. That'd be disgusting. But yeah, so that's just how it goes. I mean, you got to go in there and play well. So let's get into this week and this matchup, and kind of, Rusty, as we go throughout this week. What if you're Kirby Smart? I'm not even going to give you the luxury of being Mike Bobo or Glenn Schumann, just one side of the ball. What's your biggest concern with Alabama?
Jalen Milroe. I think you look at what has given Georgia issues and times they've lost games, and it's 2 common denominators. It's an accurate quarterback, and it's a dual threat quarterback. Somebody can throw off platform, somebody can get outside the pocket. Now, Jalen Milroe's gotten a lot better throwing the football. I don't think he's quite there that some of the guys they have faced, but they haven't faced one like this, to where he'll take off now. You look at the speed of Georgia, you look at the Jalen Walkers, and you look at the Raylan Wilson and Smile Munden and CJ Allen, those guys, sideline to sideline, man, they've got really good speed. So they're going to have to contain him, and you just have to know that you're going to give up some chunk plays. You're going to give up some chunk plays with him. You know, when I look at them, it's very similar. I don't even want to say the coach's name because he's a piece of you-know-what, but it's very similar when Baylor was successful offensively. They took shot after shot after shot on deep balls, and then they let their quarterback run. And that's kind of similar to what they do. They're going to throw a lot of deep balls. And I think Georgia's perfectly fine with Kamari Lassiter on his side, but you gotta think about Dalen Everett and knowing that teams don't go at him, and you figure that Kamari Lassiter, you're confident that you put him out there against Jermaine Burton and say this is your guy. So that leaves the other guys on Isaiah Bond and those guys that can absolutely run too. So there's gonna be some one-on-one battles, and if you flip flop it real quick, I don't get too much into this so far on Sunday night, but you can flip-flop that and you say Bama's linebackers against Georgia's tight ends. That's not a good matchup for them. So there's some worries there on my end. If I'm Kirby Smart, it starts with how are we going to play this quarterback? Are we going to spy him 90% of the time? We're going to come after him. The teams that have been successful against them a little bit they kept him in the pocket and kind of forced him to pick you apart and drive down the field. That's the only kind of nitpicking thing for him is not one of those 9 plays, 80-yard, completes 5 balls for 10, 12 yards. If they score, it's a 30-yard, at least a chunk play at some point in the drive.
What about you, Roos?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Dalen Everett was probably going to be mine for sure. I think that this is just this is a grow up game for Dalen Everett, man. He's had, moments. And I don't mean to say that Dalen Everett's played terribly this season. I think that overall he's played much better than he has poorly. But by the same token, this is probably going to be, one of the more talented wide receiver cores that he's faced this year. I think Burton's a guy who's always going to create problems. So that's something that you're kind of wringing your hands about a little bit. Tyke Smith is not exactly the fastest guy at that star position either. And so, you worry. I think that that's a bit of a concern. Now, Malachi Starks, to me, is kind of the key to this. And to steal the phrase from you, Jake Rowe, he's the straw that stirs the drink in this one, perhaps, because you're going to need him kind of on that back end. And I think on the deep field there. And you haven't had to rely on him just a ton this season. He's been able to just kind of quietly go about his business and do that. Like Rusty said, when you're hitting these chunk plays, I think that Malachi Starks is all the more important. And another guy, if we're talking about grow-up games, man, it's going to have to be those two freshman linebackers. You're going to need everything C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson got. Raylan Wilson especially is probably going to have to play a lot in this, and probably more than he's played all year. So it's, it's huge. And also too, I'm sitting here wondering, where's Georgia at health-wise with some of the guys that they need to get back into the fold with this, and how does that impact this game? We talked about those injuries on the post-game show last night, and obviously that shapes things in a very heavy way. But where are we talking about in terms of being back? Are we 100%? Are we 70%? How does that factor in, and how does that shape the game too? I think all those things are going to really be key to how this one plays out.
I mean, I have a hard time believing they won't get at least half of those guys back. That's not really any information. It's kind of tight this early in the week, and I really have a chance to reevaluate those guys. Honestly, probably won't until about Tuesday. But I will say this on the Dalen Everett thing, and I totally agree with you. Obviously he's had some bad moments here of late. Didn't have any on Saturday, but Jermaine Burton, maybe the fourth best wideout who would have lined up across from this year. Xavier Legette, Luther Burden, one of the guys from Ole Miss, maybe two of the guys from Ole Miss. I'm not saying Jermaine Burton's not a heck of a player. Who's that?
Yeah.
Trey Harris from Ole Miss.
Yeah, Trey Harris. The Singleton kid from last night, maybe. Probably right there, very close. Jermaine Burton's a really good player. I'm not trying to say he's not, but I feel like Dalen Everett has been tested a lot. We know that he's been picked on, and I do think he can kind of hold his water. I don't think Alabama's going to be the team that goes out there and hits him for 150 or 200 yards in a game, and Georgia's going to have to cover better overall too.
Well, I was going to say though, my concern in this instance is how much Milroe has the ability to extend a play with his legs, and the ability to cover up a guy for several seconds as opposed to
that puts a lot of stress on a lot of people.
Exactly. It reminds me a little bit of the CJ Stroud instance from last year, right? I mean, that was probably a combination of all things, but if you're able, the reality is nobody can cover anybody for 6 or 7 seconds. So Georgia's
Bama plays schoolyard ball like that. They'll send 4 deep on you, and then they'll say, "All right, Jalen, you and his offensive line, you sort out the pass rush and you run around a little bit. And if you need to take off, you're going to have plenty of room by the time we just keep running." So there's a little schoolyard ball to that, and not, I'm not trying to say there's a lack of sophistication to it, but it's just smart. It's just kind of smart when you got a guy who runs around like that. And it makes me wonder if Georgia, and I'm with Rusty, I don't want to get too deep, if Georgia just doesn't find a way to get a defensive back into the pass rush as often as they possibly can, just to kind of have somebody back there to match wheels with him and to keep it from getting an angle on him. But you guys are 100% right. You're going to see some instances where this cat's going to break off 22, 23 yards and angle out of bounds and probably make you put your hands on your hips a little bit. And Georgia's just going to have to work past that. Similar to that, early keys to the game. I'm going to go first here. I do think it's those injuries. And, Kirby said tonight that he felt like Brock Bowers was the closest of the guys to being back. That's good news. I watched Brock run routes in pregame. I have a hard time believing he couldn't have played. We'll see on the other 3 guys, Lab McConkey, Ra Thomas, and Tate Ratledge. But again, I think the fact that those I think there's a good chance Georgia's going to get more than one of those guys back this week, and I do think that's a big key to this game. What you got, Rusty?
Yeah, if they can go, they're going this week because you got time to get practice and all those things. And John Sisson's got a question: is Singletary out for season? I think you're thinking about Julian Humphrey.
Yeah.
Jaheim Singleton obviously transferred to Arkansas last year. So, you look at this game and the early key to victory, I think, is Georgia's offensive line. They have been playing great. They give Carson Beck so much time. Getting Amarius Mims back is such a big deal. I mean, he's going to play a lot against Dallas Turner this weekend, and Dallas Turner is a very physical. He gets after you now, and he's gonna lay the lumber if he can to Carson Beck at any point. And Maris Mims, Ernest Green, all those guys have been playing well. I think Micah Morris, Xavier Trust, even if Tate Ratledge is not able to go this weekend, I feel confident in Georgia's lineup there. And I just think the key is Georgia's offensive line. Man, they have played so well. It gives Carson Beck so much time to sit there and kind of pick things apart. If you give Carson Beck 4 seconds, it's going to cost you. And it's been that way all year.
Yeah, and also giving number 2 a lot of room to run, who is running like a very inspired individual here late in the year. So,
all right, well, there goes mine key to the game. That was
just setting you up, dude.
No, I really do. To me, that's a huge one, man. I think that this rushing attack, you really need to be clicking, and I think Carson Beck. I don't really have a lot of concerns about Carson Beck coming into this game. Like you said, Rusty, if you give him some time, he'll make it play. But he's so further along than he's progressed all year, man, and he's really looked good in doing it. To me, it's about that rushing attack and Georgia's ability to kind of set it up that way and kind of make you respect that. I think if Kendall Milton's able to do what he's done the last couple of weeks, Alabama is going to kind of have their hands full when it comes to figuring out how Georgia's going to approach this thing and how they're going to kind of skin the cat. Dejan Edwards, not his best game last night. I thought that this could be another good one for him. And I think too, really, that we're moving into that season. I think it was Palmer a couple of weeks ago that mentioned, I'm waiting on somebody that hasn't done something all year to kind of step up and do something. And to me, the guy who feels like he's getting closer is Arian Smith.
I was thinking that exact same thing.
He has been kind of flirting with it these last couple games, man. You've seen it dip down. I mean, there was one game he got one snap. There was one he may not have even played in, but there was one game he had one snap. I believe it was Vanderbilt. And he slowly kind of ticked his way back up the chart. Last night, I believe, with the most snaps he'd played in some time this season. And so, can a guy like that in a moment like this step up, kind of assert himself, make himself, put himself back on the map, or maybe it's a young guy. I don't know. But at the same time, I think that something like that could be a major key, a guy that maybe you're not suspecting, that you've been vanilla with all year, that you haven't necessarily broken out. Do you have something drawn up? Does Mike Bobo go to the bag for one in this one? This would be a perfect time to see it now.
Yeah, they're going to pull out something. They're going to pull out something. They're not leaving anything in the bag because you leave anything in the bag, you're not going to the playoffs. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there are a lot of people. I mean, no slight to anybody else out there in the college football world, but there are a lot of people that I've spoken to who believe this one might be the one for all the guts and glory, man. It's a lot like when Georgia and Alabama faced off back. What was that? The 11 game. When it was
12.
12. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of that feel going into that game. A few people I've spoken to kind of feel the same way about this one, that this one could be for all the marbles.
Well, I think if Oregon finds a way to beat Washington, I think that team is capable of beating anybody too. That one's a pretty scary team. I got to say this about 11 though, Arian Smith. I got a lot of respect for that kid because he's fought back from injuries. He's fought back from struggles. You never hear about, and we hear about it sometimes. You never hear about walking off the field at practice or not showing up for a couple days in a row or stuff like that. He just kind of keeps coming. He keeps playing gunner on punt team. There for a while, he kept dropping passes. They kept throwing them to him. He kept coming back. And these last 2 weeks, he's had like a 33-yarder on a reverse and 23 passing.
Credit
Yeah.
to him. I mean, for being the age he is, man, and being able to accept that in the transfer portal era. Like you said, you hear those talks of guys not being happy with their playing time all across the country, right? And they're already kind of turning their head toward that. It would have been easy for a guy like this to do that, I think, given how things have kind of played out for him this season, having the drops and all that. But he's really kind of powered through and been able to kind of make it happen regardless. And I think that that tenacity and sticking with it like that, I think that there's probably a reward at the end of the rainbow for him, maybe.
Well,
I like
the last time they were in that building, he had a lot to do with it. I do know that. Last time they were in that building, he had a lot to do with it. It looks real fast on that there turf. Hopefully they won't roll up. Hopefully they won't roll up the post game net in front of me again. That just completely throw me off my game.
I forgot about that. Yeah, you were transfixed on that.
I was talking to Palmer about that during the Georgia Tech game when they were rolling up that big tarp. All right, let's get to some dog stocks here. And Rusty, if you had some time to think about one.
Yeah, we kind of touched on a few things. I would say right now, and I think Jake, you touched on it, but my stock up is Arian Smith. You know what I mean? He's battled through some stuff and some inconsistencies and dropped some balls, and at some point he pretty much got benched. And Mike Bobo comes up with basically a reverse last week, just hands him the ball, and this guy, you listen to Roos talk about somebody making a play here or there. This guy makes you prepare because Alabama understands the speed. He's one of the fastest players in football. And will Carson Beck, Georgia, Mike Bobo take a shot or two with this guy? He's got a little bit of confidence. They got some things they've shown last night with hhim. And I just think that this could be one of those things that Arian Smith comes out of nowhere, and next thing you know, he's hit a 60-yarder because he can get in behind the defense. And they got some very talented players, but their secondary is really good. Those two corners, they're 2 first-rounders in Kool-Aid and Terry and Arnold. Caleb Downs is a future first-rounder, but he is a true freshman, and Auburn got him a few times yesterday stacking formations, got him kind of messed up a little bit. So the middle of the field, I think, and you look at some seam routes and those types of things, that they might turn Arian Smith loose and say, hey, go get us one right here and hit him, Carson.
I got one thing I love about dog stocks is it doesn't say you got to say stock up, stock down. You stock up, stock down, stock the same, buy some stocks, sell some stocks, whatever you want to do. I got one stock I want to buy, and I got one stock that I think is up. And obviously it's right here in the comments. And I was thinking about it before it was in the comments, Will Simpson. But Dylan Bell, guys, and John Sisson as well, but Will Simpson is bringing him up too. Dylan Bell's unbelievable. And the funny thing is like, I didn't know this, but they mentioned it on the telecast. Big Deebo Samuel guy. He's a big fan of Deebo Samuel. Might end up having a role like Deebo Samuel one day, if he gets a chance to play in the league. Was doing some really good things. Almost came up with an incredible play on that deep ball. Would have been a tough catch, but he juggled it out of bounds and would have had an even bigger day than the one he already had. Got some hidden yards for Georgia in the kickoff return game. I think, honestly, if I'm Georgia, I have a hard time not putting him back there as the main guy, at this point, just because I think he's just that good. And as much as I like Mekhi Muse, I like him a lot. It seems it's, I don't know, small guy ball security kind of worries me a little bit. But I want to buy some stock, all that you'll sell me. So if you've got some out there, I'll buy it on the Georgia defensive line because everybody's down on them. Everybody's talking about this and that and how they're not very good. I'm with Rusty. I think they're in very much due for a bounce back game. And I'm interested to see how well they play against Alabama because there's a lot of veteran leadership on that defensive line. I noticed it coming out of one of the timeouts. I believe it was on the drive where Georgia ended up where it definitely was. It was on the drive where Malachi Starks ran down the Singleton kid. Georgia ended up forcing a field goal. You saw Zion Logue down there, like getting in guys' face, clapping in their face. Listen, we got to go. We've got to be positive. We've got to stay with it. Georgia came up with a stop there. Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson. I think those guys. You got Christian Miller coming on. You got Jordan Hall playing some snaps, and he's fine after coming off the field yesterday. From what I understand, he definitely came back in the game and played several more snaps. So I think Georgia's you want a stock that you can buy low and sell high on in the course of a week. I think this is one, and I would do that with the Georgia defensive line.
Very fair. Dylan Bell, a great choice, I think, too, man. Just what a wrinkle he puts in, man. They're going to have to figure out a lot of things because Georgia has so many ways to use him. I'm going stock up on KM2, man. Kendall Milton, man. What a time for him to kind of hit his stride and be playing the best football of his entire Georgia career. Headed toward the next level, already thinking about that. But, man, out here just putting together some tremendous tape and getting better seemingly every week for Georgia. After all that he's gone through in his career, you always, you knew that the ability was there. But was he ever going to be able to harness that and kind of get it, get the injury situation and the injury bug taken care of? It was a lot of it was about the, availability for Kendall Milton. And I think now that you've made him available, he's been available, man, looking special and running with a full head of steam. And hey, look, I mean, it's not got a lot of tread on the tires from all of that time, right? He's got some fresh legs under him, all things considered. So I'm big stock up on Kendall Milton. Like I said, I think that he is so crucial to this game, especially because it allows Georgia to kind of set up the pass through the run. They need that ability. They need to make Bama respect that. And they haven't always been able to do that necessarily, given some of the injuries they faced over the course of the year and some of the limitations that they've had. KM2, man, big game for him ahead. I really like it. And I think that he plays a crucial role on Saturday against the Crimson Tide.
Provided his next carry doesn't go, because he has 99 carries on the year, provided his next carry doesn't lose 25 yards or something, he is going to have the highest yards per carry for any Georgia running back with 100 carries or more since Sony Michel in 2017. That's how good he's been. Better than anything DeAndre Swift ever did. Better than anything James Cook ever did with 100 carries.
Wow. Would you have taken that? Would you have taken that bet going into the year? I don't think many people would have.
I wouldn't have. And listen, this is why I've kind of been graceful with those folks that were, like, hey, I understand the frustration. I wouldn't have at the beginning of the year, because not that I didn't know he wasn't going to look good when he got healthy. Sure. I just didn't know if he was ever going to get healthy. And just like last year, battling the very similar injuries early in the year, he finally got healthy. And he's really shining at the end of the year. I mean, I don't think folks understand how good he was in last year's SEC championship game. So, that might be something that Georgia is able to lean on. And that's the one thing I've set beside Rusty in a couple of SEC championship games. And one of the things we've talked about every time is, hey, Georgia's not able to run the ball, or hey, Georgia's able to run the ball a little bit. That's the first thing we talk about when we kind of get to discussing it. So that's going to be a big one on Saturday. And we'll have it covered for you over here at DawgsHQ tomorrow night. We got Bark After Dark. Roddy Nabalsi from UGAsports.com is going to be joining us, and God knows what we're going to talk about. It could be anything.
Abdul the Butcher for sure.
We'll talk some Abdullah the Butcher, a lot of other things, but we're excited about talking to Roddy. And then we'll be back with you Wednesday night with the Georgia Show at 8 p.m. Come join us. Like and subscribe. Make sure you check us out there, and come on over to DawgsHQ. We're going to be loaded with content this week. For this episode of the Georgia Show, I'm Jake Rowe. He's Rusty Mansell and Jake Roos, and we will catch up with you guys very soon.
Adios.